Okay, so today, one question I would love to ask every single brand is if a stranger took 30 seconds to look at your brand right now, would they be able to tell you what you do, who you do it for, and why it matters?
I think that most people would say yes because we live in our heads and we know what we want to convey all the time. But then,
Yeah.
upon further thought, they'll realize that the answer is somewhere between kind of, sort of, maybe not. And it just
Mhm.
depends on which page they're on, right? So, which that would be different from yes, which I think.
Right.
Yeah. And I think most brands don't find out that they have a problem until the problem gets expansive too, right? I
Hmm.
think when they notice that sales or marketing or a new hire can't even explain what the brand is. And unfortunately, by that point, it's no longer just a branding problem. It's an actual business problem.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think a lot of companies just they think it's a business problem, right? But they don't understand that the brand is more than your logo, your website, your messaging. And then when they have these issues, they don't think about it as a brand. It becomes a business problem and they all are so intertwined. So that those visuals, that website, the logo, those are the old rules. And this is brand new rules.
We're making brand new rules, taking things in a brand new direction, coloring outside of the lines and doing things our own way.
Welcome back to Brand New Rules. On this podcast, we break down branding, challenge outdated advice, and bring you fresh perspective you can use, or at the very least, will make you think. I'm Ariana, and I'm joined by my lovely co-hosts, Jasmine and Christina, and we have real conversations about what it takes to build a brand that gets noticed and how branding shows up in culture, trends, and the way that people connect every day. We're also the founders of Groundfire Agency, so if you want to see what we're building beyond the mic, check us out on our website, Instagram, and YouTube. All right, let's get into it.
All right, so this is our season finale, everybody. Insert, yay, we did it here.
Woo! 8 episodes.
We've spent 8 episodes talking about all of the brands, the branding, what we think, what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong. And so today we want to talk about you. We want to talk about our listener. And we bet there's a good chance that you or your organization have a branding problem, which is why you're listening to this podcast. Or maybe you're just interested in general in hearing us yammer on about things. Either way, this is always the right place for you to be. And so we're just going to dig right into, but we're also going to ask you some questions throughout the episode today to just hear from you. We want to keep the conversation going even after this episode. We talk a lot throughout all of the episodes about branding issues. So consider some of these questions as a pop quiz. And the first question will be, how do you know if you have a branding problem, and why do most people not realize it until it's already costing them?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I'm going to
Yeah.
jump in with the most obvious one. The layup, the real easy ones, is the logo. Like people think that having a logo is your brand, especially, and obviously once you get to like these larger brands, I'm talking here really specifically about small business, entrepreneurs, people just getting off the ground and they don't really understand what diving into a brand means. They're like, I have a logo, I have a word mark, and they think that's it. And a logo is just a visual, and your brand in its entirety is a promise to your consumer. It is a promise to your client about who you are, what you're going to deliver, and how.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also think too, a branding problem sneaks up on you if your business is moving at such a fast pace and you're uber successful. And then you realize there's facets that can polish it up a little bit more and make it
Mhm.
feel more cohesive. And so if your business has outpaced the foundation of your company, which is your brand identity, that's a way to know that you have a branding issue.
Hmm.
But I think that we don't talk enough about the outpacing.
Agree. I would also say that how your team describes what you do differently, depending on who's asking, can be a problem. And it's not about like There's a difference of changing your messaging to fit your audience. It's not about that. It goes when there's like no cohesion to all the different messaging that's happening. And then your consumers, the customers, the audience begins to feel that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you both touched on, Jasmine, you talked about outpacing, like you're moving too fast, that your brand's not catching up because you're not constantly in it. But Ari, on the flip side, when you're saying if different teams are talking about different things, or your marketing doesn't seem to be hitting, or maybe you're not hitting the sales targets that you want to be, it's usually your branding also. That can happen when you are outpacing and then you've gone too far too fast and all of a sudden it slows down and you don't know why.
Yeah.
And it's probably a brand. It hasn't caught up, or your internal team or your different teams don't know how you're supposed to be talking about your brand.
One thing that we haven't really spoken much about on our episodes is market research. And it's top of mind because we just completed market research for one of our
Yeah.
clients pretty extensively. And when I was having a conversation and we were talking through all of the research findings, one of the things that was mentioned was that this is usually a rebranding step or an afterthought when you've realized that the company's rate and speed of growth has outpaced the brand identity and foundation. Then people usually take it a step back and they want to do market research and try to figure out where they went wrong. And part of branding is that initial market research. Where do you fit? Who's your target audience? And all of the elements that we've discussed throughout all of the episodes. But that is one key factor that is so important. And to really understand how to position yourself from the very start is so important. So I just wanted to name that because that's something we haven't really touched a lot on, but it's a really important piece when we think about branding.
Yeah.
Because it allows you to figure out how to define yourself in the market. And I think when there is that confusion, when you're starting to outpace, I think a lot of that goes back into you haven't defined yourself well, right? You haven't thought it out of like who you are and what do you stand for. And I think that's another piece of that.
Yeah. And I
completely
think
agree.
it's important that that's ongoing. This isn't a one-time thing. Market research isn't a one-time thing. Building your brand isn't a one-time thing. Your messaging, your positioning, these are all part of your brand that continue to evolve. Whether you're outpaced or you're slowing down, like they continue to evolve over time, and you need to be actively looking at them. That's why metrics are so important. That is why market research, Jasmine, to your point, is so important. You need to be constantly looking at who your customers are, what they're resonating with, because, you know, we can do all the market research in the world and the messaging and the positioning. And, you know, honestly, sometimes it does, sometimes it hits wrong. And then you have to go back and look at what happened. And sometimes it hits right. And you want that information too. What about this resonated? What about this stuck? Because you have to keep evolving and moving forward. It's a constant evolution of your brand,
also
your
too,
messaging, your research.
I completely agree. And I think that
Agree.
research too is so timely. So if you do the initial research to launch your business and to create your brand identity and your positioning from that space, understand that trends change, the market changes. And so it is an ongoing branding effort that I think they go hand in hand. They are the same thing.
Yeah. And I think that was an interesting, you know, you talked about our client that we did extensive market research for, and we had a hypothesis about where we thought they would stand in the market. And actually, we had 10. We had 10 hypotheses.
Yeah.
And we disproved some, we proved some. But one of them, and this was a really special moment because one of them was proven so specifically,
And
so
all in
outrageously that we
every
were all
end
shocked.
of the research. Yeah.
Yes, we knew this was going to be a really big position for this brand, but we didn't know it was going to come across in the way that it did. And that was a really cool moment that if we hadn't gone out and done the research, we would have been right, you know, in our hypothesis, and we would have moved forward with this positioning. And that's great. You know, we're good at what we do. But having that research to back it up was such a cool moment, honestly.
It was so cool. And also too, the things that we were wrong about were revealing as well. And I
That's
was so
super
grateful for
helpful.
that. Yeah, it was so helpful because just being like, even the parts that we were like off base with, it was great to know. And I learned so much about that specific industry as we did our research. So that was incredible to go on that journey for our client as well.
what's nice about these findings and having this and completing it is that it's something for you to reference back to, right? Because as you are evolving, you have this to go back and ground yourself when you get to a kind of crossroads in decision making or how you want to speak about who you are. You can reference these findings.
Yeah.
So there's something that we do in our brand strategy work that I want to talk a little bit about today. And it is exactly what you just said, Ari. It is that brand archaeology. Like digging up the dinosaurs, going back to the first things you did as a company, right?
Yeah.
So it's exactly what it sounds like. Going back to that first pitch, that first logo, old website copy, taglines, etc. Like early social posts, which for most companies, for most people, for most humans are super embarrassing. And that's fine.
Yes.
That is
That
fine.
is, yeah.
But so in this brand archaeology, we go back and we look at your brand and we read what you said about yourself at a point in time. And so there's a couple of different things that we sometimes find, right? Like either the brand evolved, it got clearer over time, it really came into its own. Another thing we sometimes find is it drifted. It changed direction, maybe without realizing it. Maybe it was intentional, but sometimes it's chasing a trend. Sometimes it's market pressure. Sometimes it is because it was a strategic decision, right? It was something important that they knew they needed to do for their brand. Other times it completely abandoned something. And there was this core idea, this core hypothesis, if you will, kind of left behind. And sometimes, a lot of times, actually, it's the purpose. It's what made those founders or whoever started this company like get out of bed in the morning. And sometimes it goes away without noticing. And again, that's not a good or bad thing necessarily.
Right.
On the surface,
The
but
evolution.
it is
Right.
the evolution. But it's important to go back and know where you came from to understand where you want to go. So the reason today that we're saying this matters in this final episode is that most of you listening have old materials. You have an old website, a first bio, first pitch. And that's whether you work at an organization, whether you're in branding or marketing, whether you have your own company, everyone has a first something they can go back to. So you can take that, you can look and say, how does this connect or does it connect to what I'm saying now about this thing, this project, this organization, et cetera? And is that gap intentional or did I just drift?
Yeah. No, I think that's
Love that.
really a solid way to audit your business. And then when we talk about deep diving into old materials, isn't just going back for the sake of going back, to your point, Christina. It's about understanding what you believe, if it's still true. And so evolution is important as a business. And that's, a lot of what we preach to our clients and remember in our own business. But sometimes you just find a phrase or a positioning statement that you've abandoned that you had no business abandoning. And then you need to take it back, right? So I think it's really cool to when we think about this, to think about our own business and how we've done this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've done this a lot.
We've done this a whole lot. What would you say? How have we done this in our business?
I'm leaning into more of kind of the visuals of who we are. And something that I think I'm glad we took the time to do was think about what's our brand personality? What do we want to kind of embody and the vibes that we want to give off? I think it has evolved because our business has expanded. It's not just about having a web page or business cards or just a couple one-pagers. We're doing more, so we don't want everything to look the same either. So I think we're starting to think about what ways can we get creative with these core aesthetics that we want to represent us.
I would agree with that, Ari. And I think I love your point about we're evolving because we're doing more. We haven't necessarily changed our color palette, right? But we do change the way that we use it. Different products have a different visual aesthetic than it does for maybe a corporate client, than it does for maybe a startup. And so, yeah, I agree. I definitely think it's evolved. And it also leads a little bit into my observation is some of it's evolved because of the way that AI has evolved, honestly. It has allowed us to do some more things that on our own that maybe we couldn't do in the past. And that leads me to where we were in the beginning. So when we first, were building our website, we had come from a place where, hey, we don't want to be left behind. We don't want to pretend like AI doesn't exist. We want to do it ethically, but we want to be part of this. And so we put it on our website. We talked about data. We talked about AI. And we did a little brandy archaeology and an audit. And I think we went back and we felt a little bit of imposter syndrome. And we're like, nope, scratch that. We actually don't know what we're doing there.
But what is this? Which, by the way,
Right.
to our credit, most companies were in that space a year and a half ago.
Totally.
Mhm.
Totally. And then Jasmine and I went to a conference and we grounded ourselves in what we do know and kind of, I don't say we got rid of the imposter syndrome, but we acknowledged it and then like leaned into what we know versus what we don't know and realized that, hey, there is space for an AI play here or some sort of technology play that we can operate in while still remaining true to our values, true to our ethics, that grounding messaging that we set out to start with in the very beginning. And so now we're at a point again where we're reevaluating this and understanding how do we bring this back?
That was because we looked back and we were like, no, we actually do use technology in this way, and let's not shy from that. Let's own it and be really more intentional about
And I
it.
think we've come really far. We leaned in because we took the opportunity and time to learn it. And it was like everyone started picking up brilliant ways on how to use it. And it's consistently evolving in what we're learning, pushing ourselves to grow in ways that feels ethical and also feels progressive. And, you know, being confirmed by going out in the wild and hearing other businesses asking Groundfire how to use certain AI platforms for their business. It's like, oh, well, okay, add that back to the website. We know what we're doing now. But yeah, really proud of, you know, how far we've come with that aspect and definitely grown.
I'm also super proud of because we did so much work on our messaging in the beginning and our values. We're looking at the way that we use AI always through a human-centered lens. Like that is one
Always.
of our main values. And even when we
100%.
decided to bring it back, that is the lens through which we view it and operate in it. And I think it was a really cool learning to go back and be like, hey, we're grounded in this positioning and we're going to bring back this other thing only through that lens.
Always. That's the crux of what we do. And I will also say, thinking about the beginning too, it's like how we decided to just like what type of company we would be and the evolution of it. That is the biggest change. What, you know,
That's so true.
that's the biggest
Jazz.
change. That's the biggest change out of all of the changes. Like the type of company we decided to make and build and grow and start has changed. But the core of who we are and why we started this business is the same. But, you know, we care about how people feel when they show up at work. But we were like, hold up. There is a bigger lane that exists and it will require a little bit of a learning curve here and there. But we're going to go over there and we're going to merge our passion and this branding world together. And you know, look at things from the inside out. And we're like, ooh, inside out, that's our approach. And then we started navigating how we wanted to build this company. And here we are, a thriving company that's growing and has a lot of momentum and just, you know, really proud of it. And so it's just like thinking through all of these elements. We're sharing this, not just to like pat ourselves on the back.
Although we do enjoy doing that.
Yeah, that's it is one of our favorite pastimes, but it's because it's important if you're building a company and you're thinking about like, you know, trying to get it right, you know, it is something that is ever growing. You want to try to at least have a foundation so that even if it's tweaked and not started in the middle of your momentum. And so I'm just really glad we did that.
Yeah. And Jazz, I was going to say, I think that's something that's really important when you think about, and again, not branding being separate from your business plan, but part of it, like a thread throughout it is the fact that like we were very intentional, and not only because we're building a branding agency, so like we need to be, but
we had to make sure our branding was on point. Yeah.
Right. But it has been so helpful for us as we really gained momentum that we were super intentional and took the time to
know.
ask ourselves these hard questions and be really reflective. And so I think not only were we thinking about it being critical to the type of business that we were doing, but I think we've seen it, the benefits of it as we have gained that momentum and growth.
Yeah, so this episode, obviously, we're wrapping up the season. We're talking a lot about ourselves because it's our podcast. But we're also gonna
We
gonna
like
flip
to.
the script. Yeah, because we love talking about ourselves. But we're also gonna flip the script a little bit. And, I know that in every episode we propose a question for y'all at the end and we give you new rules. But this one we're gonna do a little bit more. We're gonna ask you to dig a little bit deeper because you're going to miss us over these next couple months. So we're going to give you something to do while we're gone. And then when you come back, we can answer all your questions.
Summer homework.
So yeah, a little bit of homework, some summer reading, some
Mm.
summer reflection.
Yes.
So I want to ask you all, our listeners, to find your oldest piece of brand material. And again, if you are not a branding expert, you're not in branding, marketing, you don't run an organization, go through your social media, go through your personal brand.
Personal
We have
brand.
not touched much on personal brands yet, but we probably will someday.
Season 2.
Go back
We
to
for sure
your,
will.
go back to your socials and read it and ask yourself, does this still sound like us? And, we're all millennials here, the three of us. So the first Instagram post that I ever posted was a very long time ago. And I was a late bloomer to Instagram. So, but it was still a long time ago.
I was too.
But take a look at it and ask yourself, does this still sound like me? Is it still accurate, but does it still sound like you? And the gap between then and now, that's information. It'll tell you whether you've evolved, whether you've drifted, or if you've abandoned something worth keeping.
Okay. So we talked a bit about what we did to go back and audit our brand, all of the elements that we did to build it, check it, recheck it, all of those things,
How we've
right?
grown.
How we've grown, pat ourselves on the back, all the things, honey, all the things. But now we want to talk about the 4 things that we believe every brand should be able to answer. And just keep in mind, these are things that we check ourselves against as well, right? So first step, what do you do and who specifically is this for? And I will take it a step further to say, what problem do you solve? Know your industry, not just your category. What specifically do you do? And also when you're building this out in your brain, think about the person. Put that target audience in your mind. Think about the problems that they have. Where can they find you? That is definitely first step. Every brand should be able to answer that question.
What do you believe that your competitors don't? Because that is your actual point of view, not your differentiator, right? What do you believe about how this work should be done or what this industry gets wrong that drives every decision you make?
That's amazing. That's a good one.
Yeah, because I think if you can't answer this, then you don't have a brand position.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the next one is, what would your best client say about you if you weren't in the room? Not what you want them to say, not what they said on your Google review because you asked them to give you 5-star reviews, which you definitely should do because that's really good credibility. But what would they actually say? If there's a gap between what you want them to say and then what they would actually say, you need to know where to lean in there. That's really helpful information.
That's a good one. And then finally, what would you never do? And what would you do, right? But never do really, even if it was profitable. That goes along with that values piece that we're always talking about. Every brand has a line, or at least should have a line. I don't know if every brand has a line, but they should have a line. Let's just clarify that there.
Yeah, a moral compass.
We hope. Fingers crossed.
Yes.
But the brands that hold their identity, they all have answers to this question. It's usually written. It's not just on their website. It's in their policies. It shows up in how they brand, how they promote their business in every single way. So what would you never do even if it was profitable?
Okay, y'all. 4 questions. Don't have to answer them right now, but we hope you've written them down. And we'd say come back to them this week, later this month, sometime before season 2 drops. But be honest with yourself about where you're hesitant, because that hesitation is the map?
Okay, so we've done 8 episodes, and we want to take a minute not to summarize them because y'all should go listen to them all. Looking back at the arc, every episode was really the same argument from a different lens. Which episode, or even just a single idea or moment from this season, is one that you loved?
Okay. I would say episode 3, when we talked about brand and growth are not separate lanes and discussed how brand is the foundation growth is built on. It just, not only was it a fun conversation, but it was interesting to really make that connection again of like that this is a through line to your business.
Say for me, episode 4, Gen Z is not your rebrand strategy. That was a fun one just because, so many people are leaning into trying to please the younger crowd. And I think that's even the episode where we started finding out that people are headed back to analog strategies. And it was fun kind of digging into brands that were catered to our time that are coming back. And that was a fun episode.
Yeah, I agree. I loved that episode. And in combination with episode 5, I think 4 and 5 were really kind of like building off of each other. With the Gen Z and the analog. And especially, it was fun to connect with Gen Z. And y'all are now interested in something that was like part of my childhood. And I think that's really cool. So those two, I think, are kind of tied for me.
Okay. So every single episode comes back to the same thing. You have to know who you are before you build outward. And it's the hardest thing to answer, too.
The work lies in between. And if you've been sitting with any of these questions this season, if there's something we said in an episode that stuck with you or made you uncomfortable, then we built something specifically for you.
We did. We built something for you called the Brand Clarity Quiz. So it takes about 2 minutes, super simple, and it's designed to do one thing, and it's to help you name which part of your brand needs the most attention right now. It is not going to go super in-depth. It is just a quick diagnosis because you can't fix what you haven't named. So this will help you name what you might need to focus on right in this particular moment. So you'll get a personalized result with a practical guide specific to where you are. And the link is in our show notes or on our website.
And if the quiz tells you something that you already suspected, that's when you come to talk to us. We'd love to hear from you, and that's what we're here for.
So even though we asked a little more of you today and we talked a little bit more about ourselves by turning the questions on you and your organization, we still have a rule that we want to leave you with because this is brand new rules after all. And so the last one of this season is branding is not a project that you finish. It is a practice that you return to. So you don't have to be loud, trendy. You definitely don't have to be everywhere, but you do have to be clear. You have to be clear enough that the right people find you, trust you, and stay.
Such a good rule. And every episode this season came back to the same thing. We're preaching, standing on our soaps, that you have to know who you are before you build outward. So in addition to the brand clarity quiz, I will say that if you want to dig into any of these topics in season 2 with us, or if you have a brand issue that you want to chat with us about on the pod, we would love to have you. DM us on Instagram. We would love to hear from you and maybe chat with you in season 2.
All right, y'all. Well, that wraps up season 1 of Brand New Rules. 8 episodes. We did it. Woo-hoo! 8 arguments for the same thing. That the most important brand work happens before anyone sees it on the inside.
Yep. So we're going on a short hiatus. We will be back with season 2 in the fall, in October. And if you've been sitting with something from this season, a question, a realization, a thing you've been avoiding looking at in your own brand, now is actually the perfect time to do something about it. Don't wait for us to come back. You've got all summer. Go do it.
So while we're gone, if something comes up for you, DM us on Instagram or book a consultation through our website. That's an in-depth conversation we would love to have to really get into the weeds of what you're building or what you want to rebuild. This is exactly the work that we do. We love doing it, and we would love to do it with you.
Thank you for spending the season with us, genuinely. For the listens, the shares, the DMs, the conversations the show has started. That's why we do this.
Follow Groundfire Agency on Instagram rate us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, 5 stars only, and send this season to someone who's building something worth protecting.
Yes, this is Brand New Rules. See you all in season 2. Bye.
Peace.